Welcome to the deep dive. Okay, for any serious golfer, we all know this feeling, right? The quest for that consistent ball flight, it feels like the holy grail. We've definitely all been there. You have that perfect swing thought, you feel confident over the ball, and then whoosh, it slices off or hooks like crazy. It's just so frustrating because honestly, your feel is often lying to you. So today, we're going to try and cut through that noise. We want to reveal the, well, maybe surprising truth behind really mastering your golf shots. It comes down to total club face control.
That really is it. So many golfers focus on, say, their swing plane or hip
Yeah.
rotation, maybe even tempo. And those are all crucial elements, of course they are. But the club face at the moment of impact, that's the actual steering wheel for your golf ball. It's dictating not just where the ball starts, but also how much it curves. And what's really fascinating, I think, is how often amateur golfers unknowingly twist or manipulate that club face. And it almost always comes back to subtle, ingrained wrist mechanics they're just completely unaware of. Unlocking this connection, it's the absolute bedrock for taking command of your game.
Yeah, exactly. And that's really our mission here in this deep dive. We want to guide you through those critical tech points in the swing where wrist influence is just paramount. We want to expose those hidden wrist movements that might be betraying your shots and, importantly, give you some practical, actionable drills straight from our sources. The goal is to help you calibrate your internal feel so you can finally match your intention with the actual ball flight. Because once you genuinely grasp this principle, you won't just see patterns in your shots, you'll start to understand why they're happening and, crucially, how to fix them. So let's dive right in. What our sources seem to repeatedly emphasize is this. The wrists are arguably the primary controllers of that club face. Now, obviously, body rotation, club path, your grip, they're all critical pieces of the puzzle. We get that. But the actual orientation of that club face at impact, whether it's open, square, or closed, that's predominantly determined by the dynamic interplay of your wrist flexion and extension. It seems like the core principle.
It truly is. It really is the core. And to really get a handle on this, we need to walk you through some key checkpoints in the swing. These are the spots where your wrist influence is most pronounced. And they aren't just, arbitrary points. Think of them like diagnostic stations where you can spot issues before they turn into those really frustrating ball flights.
Okay.
So our first diagnostic station is the takeaway. Specifically, when the club shaft first gets parallel to the ground, this initial move, it's kind of like setting the trajectory for a rocket launch, right? Get it wrong here, and the whole mission is compromised. Ideally, at this exact point, your club face should be tilted slightly downward, maybe around 15 to 20 degrees or so. And that little tilt, that's your first indicator that your lead wrist is in a neutral, balanced position.
Okay, so if that's the ideal, what are the earliest, maybe most common mistakes you see right there? Things that are already setting a golfer up for trouble? Because I can imagine a lot of listeners might think, oh, my takeaway's fine, but maybe discover it's actually the root of the problem.
Absolutely. Happens all the time. One of the biggest culprits, I'd say, is when the club face points too much up towards the sky at this stage. That's a classic sign your lead wrist is overextended.
Mm.
It's often described as being cupped. Imagine the back of your lead hand having a little dip or cup in it. That cupping immediately opens the club face. And from there, you're already fighting an uphill battle just to try and square it at impact. That often leads directly to that slice.
Right.
Now, conversely, if the face is turned down too much, like looking almost horizontal to the ground,
Yeah.
that usually means your wrist might be too flexed or bowed. Think of pushing the back of your lead hand slightly outwards, creating a flat or even slightly convex shape. Now, some elite players do this intentionally,
So you see that sometimes.
but for most golfers, it leads to a club face that's way too closed, setting them up for a hook.
What's really interesting there is how practical that first checkpoint is. Like you said, you don't need fancy tech for that one. You can literally just set up your phone, film yourself, and probably see it straight away. And even subtle deviations there, like you mentioned, can have this big cascading effect, making it so much harder to recover later in the swing. It's like that tiny crack in the foundation.
Precisely. It weakens the whole structure. And that leads us very naturally to our second critical checkpoint, the very top of the backswing. Now, at this point, the ideal for your lead wrist is for it to appear flat. So what does that mean in simple terms? It just means the back of your lead hand should be in a straight line, aligning directly with your forearm. Almost like you're trying to balance a tray on the back of your hand and forearm, this flat wrist. It's the strongest indicator that your club face is square, it's under control, and it's really poised for a powerful and accurate downswing.
Yeah, I remember struggling with this myself for ages, trying to feel flat, and you see the video and, oh, still cupping it. It's such a classic case of what feels right being completely wrong, isn't it?
It really is.
So if we're not flat here, if we've got that cup or maybe too much bow, what are the immediate consequences as we start down?
Oh, the consequences are immediate and significant. If you have that excessive extension, that cupped lead wrist we talked about,
Uh-oh.
it just further opens the club face. This dramatically increases your likelihood of coming over the top
Yeah.
and producing that slice that starts left and just sails off to the right. On the flip side, if you're excessively flexing or bowing, that wrist, well, that closes the club face right down. So for a right-handed golfer, this often results in shots that start straight, maybe even a bit right, and then just hook aggressively left. The real nuance here, I think, is that many players might feel stable or okay at the top, but they're unknowingly introducing these really detrimental wrist movements. That's why this checkpoint is so vital for self-assessment.
Okay, that makes sense. So let's say we've managed to set the club face properly at the top. Now comes the moment of truth, the downswing. Our third checkpoint brings us to when the club is once again parallel to the ground, but now it's on its way down towards the ball. You mentioned this point is crucial because it dictates both the quality of contact and the initial direction. What should we be looking for here?
Right. So here, ideally, the club face should appear slightly turned down again,
Yeah.
much like it was back in the takeaway checkpoint, kind of mirroring that position. But the real challenge for most golfers at this stage is just the sheer speed of the downswing. It happens in a blur.
Yeah, it's so fast.
You simply can't consciously feel or see what your wrists are doing in real time. It's just too quick.
Yeah.
This is where, if you have access to it, slow motion video, or maybe even specialized motion sensors like hack motion, they become incredibly valuable. They can actually reveal whether you're prematurely opening or closing that club face during this incredibly rapid sequence, often when you least expect it. It's not really about trying to force a position here, but more about seeing if your earlier setup and wrist movements are allowing the club face to deliver itself correctly without extra manipulation.
Gotcha. Checking the process, not forcing the result.
Exactly. And finally, we arrive at our fourth and perhaps most revealing checkpoint, the follow-through. Specifically, we're looking at when the shaft is parallel to the ground again, but this time after impact. This is basically your report card for the shot. In an ideal follow-through, your club face should be almost vertical, think straight up and down, not pointing towards the sky, not pointing down at the ground. And importantly, the shaft should still be trailing behind your lead arm. It shouldn't have overtaken it yet. This is the visual proof that you haven't done any excessive rolling or flipping of the club through the impact zone. Those things are notorious for causing inconsistency.
I really like that idea of it being a report card. It's an incredible diagnostic tool because it shows you the result of your impact dynamics without even needing to see where the ball went. It's like peeking at the answer sheet after the test.
Precisely.
So what are the common mistakes we see here in this follow-through position, and what do they tell us about what actually happened a split second earlier at impact?
Okay, good question. So, if the shaft has already overtaken your lead arm, and maybe the club face is pointing significantly down towards the ground,
Uh-huh.
that's a pretty clear telltale sign of over-rotation or an active flip with the hands through impact. That's a hook just waiting to happen. Often comes from an excessively bowed wrist or maybe just over-aggressive forearm rotation. On the other hand, if the face is pointing too much up towards the sky, well, that means it was likely too open at impact. This is often a result of holding on to too much extension, that cupping, in the lead wrist. Maybe someone's trying desperately to prevent the hook and actually ends up causing a slice instead.
The classic overcorrection.
Exactly. So practicing this stopping point, freezing right after impact, it's incredibly effective. It gives you that immediate visual feedback, and it starts to teach your body how to control the club face, rather than just letting it, go wild through the strike zone and leaving the outcome completely to chance.
Okay, this is great. We've really unpacked the what and the why of club face control and those key wrist positions. But look, understanding it intellectually is one thing. Actually feeling it and applying it consistently on the course is another beast entirely. So what practical steps can listeners take, maybe starting today, to actually correct these issues and really ingrain better club face control?
Right, that's where the rubber meets the road, isn't it?
Right.
The goal here is definitely to internalize these correct positions, make them feel natural. And our sources really highlight two main paths forward: using objective feedback and developing subjective feel. For objective feedback, tools like the Hack Motion wrist sensor that I mentioned, they're excellent. They provide precise, real-time data on your wrist angles throughout the entire swing. It just removes all the guesswork. It's almost like having an MRI for your wrists during the swing.
Yeah, and our sources actually give us some specific target numbers if you are using a sensor like that, which is incredibly helpful. For instance, at setup, your lead wrist should ideally show about, 15 to 20 degrees of extension. Then as you move into the takeaway, you want to transition smoothly to around 5 to 7 degrees of flexion.
That's right.
Then at the top of the backswing, the goal is that flat wrist, which translates to maybe about 3 degrees of flexion. You then want to try and maintain that slight flexion during the downswing, almost feeling like you're leading with the back of your hand. And finally, in that follow-through checkpoint we just talked about, the club face should be vertical with the shaft trailing your lead arm. These aren't just random numbers, right? They're biomechanically optimized positions to help deliver a square club face.
Yeah, exactly. They're based on what efficient, powerful swings tend to look like.
But look, for those listening who don't have a high-tech sensor, please don't worry. You can still make really significant progress. You can use stop-and-hold drills, which rely purely on subjective feedback, on feel. These are actually fantastic for helping you feel the changes in your wrists and club face position. By pausing deliberately at those checkpoints, you engage your proprioception. That's your body's innate sense of its own position and movement. It helps you build muscle memory without needing any fancy equipment at all. It just requires being deliberate and, frankly, a bit patient.
Right, deliberate practice. And beyond just the motion and the drills, there's another crucial element, one that's often overlooked but directly impacts your ability to control that club face. And that's your grip. I mean, it sounds obvious, but your grip is your only connection to the club. It fundamentally influences how much you can and should twist or rotate that club face during your swing. It really is your control panel. Absolutely, couldn't agree more. For slicers, for example, a very common recommendation, and often a very effective one, is to adopt what's known as a stronger grip. Now, this simply means rotating both hands slightly to the right on the club handle, assuming you're a right-handed golfer. Usually means you'll visibly see more knuckles on your lead hand, maybe 2 or 3, instead of just 1 or even none.
Okay.
This adjustment physically gives you more rotational room to flex your wrist and actively close the club face through impact.
Yeah.
It naturally helps mitigate that open face that causes the slice. It gives you more leverage, essentially.
Okay, that makes sense. And conversely, I assume, for those battling a hook.
Exactly. For the hookers, the advice is typically to move towards a weaker grip. So this means placing your hands more on top of the handle. For a righty, fewer knuckles would be visible on that lead hand. This position tends to limit excessive face closure. It promotes a more neutral, or even slightly open, controlled club face position through impact, helping to tame that aggressive hook.
Right. And what's often misunderstood here, I think, is that strong and weak aren't about how tightly you're gripping the club, are they?
Not at all. That's a common misconception. It's purely about how your hands are oriented on the grip, which then influences your wrist positioning and the available range of motion they have during the swing. The ultimate goal isn't to force everyone into one specific grip type, but simply to help you find the setup that allows your wrist to operate most effectively for the ball flight you want. It's about finding the biomechanical advantage that suits your swing and your miss.
Okay, so to really tie all this together, the checkpoints, the wrist angles, the grip, and build that genuine awareness and feel, our sources offer a really practical practice smart strategy, something you can implement on the range, maybe even just doing slow swings in your backyard starting today. This one feels like a potential game changer for actually internalizing all this stuff.
Yeah, it's a very simple drill, but it can be profoundly effective. Here's what you do. Hit a golf ball, or even just make a practice swing and then immediately freeze your finish. Stop when your arms and the club shaft are parallel to the ground after impact, just like that fourth checkpoint we discussed.
Oh.
Hold that position for a second. Then, without moving anything else, just take a good, honest look at your club face. Is it pointing way up to the sky? That indicates an open club face at impact. Is it pointing significantly downward? That means it was probably too closed. The beauty is you get instant, undeniable visual feedback right there.
Right. And once you observe that, you can then start making conscious adjustments, maybe thinking back to your takeaway or the top of your swing, adjusting your wrist movement slightly to match the outcome you actually want. But this does raise an important question for the listener. How do you find your just right position? It's easy to say vertical face, but feel is tricky.
That's a great point. And our sources suggest applying what you might call the Goldilocks principle. Don't be afraid to actually exaggerate both extremes first. Hit some shots or make some swings, where you intentionally try to leave the face noticeably open in that follow-through position. Then hit some where you really try to make it overly closed, pointing down.
Feel the extremes.
Exactly. By really feeling those drastic differences, the too hot and too cold,
Hmm.
swings, if you will, you can then work your way back towards neutral. It allows you to truly feel what your perfect or just right club face position feels like through impact. It sounds a bit counterintuitive, perhaps, but sometimes you really do have to get it wrong, intentionally wrong, to truly understand what's right for you.
And there you have it. I think what we've really explored today shows that mastering club face control isn't necessarily about achieving perfect robotic mechanics on every single swing. That's probably unrealistic for most of us.
Mm.
It's more fundamentally about becoming a keen observer of your own swing, understanding your natural tendencies, maybe you tend to cut, maybe you tend to bow, and then learning how to make the necessary, often subtle adjustments to deliver that club face square to the target more often. It's like becoming your own golf swing detective.
Yeah, I like that analogy. And if we connect this back to the bigger picture, the potential benefit here for the listener is truly immense. We're talking about more consistent control over where the ball goes, reliably better ball striking, which feels amazing,
Oh,
and hopefully a dramatic reduction in those really frustrating slices and hooks that just plague so many golfers and ruin scorecards. So we'd really encourage you to start by just building awareness of your wrist positions at those key swing checkpoints we outlined. Use tools or video for objective feedback if you can get it. It really helps. And definitely don't be afraid to explore those subtle grip changes and maybe try those Goldilocks drills to find your personal sweet spot. It really is a journey of discovery, but one that pays huge dividends on the course.
absolutely. So, as you head to the range next time, or maybe even just swinging a club in your living room tonight, here's a final provocative thought for you to ponder. What subtle shift in your wrist position, maybe just a few degrees difference at one single key checkpoint, could potentially unlock a fundamentally different, more consistent ball flight? And how might that single, perhaps surprising insight completely change your entire approach to playing golf? Something to think about until next time on the Deep Dive.